cable, yes. So good morning, church. How are we? Hey, that was good first time. I didn't have to ask again. Praise the Lord. Anyway, hands up. Well, you don't actually have to put your hands up. Hands up are those who noticed I had a haircut. Okay. Hands up are those, or keep your hands up if you notice my beard's gone. Oh, it's only about half of those hands remained. Hands up those who don't care. Oh, that's the most amount of hands I ever seen. I thought this would be an exercise on identity, you see. So I thought that my identity is not in my beard. As you know, we are preaching, or we are discussing about identity. So it was just an excuse to shave my beard off, really. But I look, yes, bald in many respects now. So anyway, let's just recap where we're at. We are talking about Moses. We have 3 weeks about Moses. We are on week 2. We are halfway through. So I just want to recap where we were. So we know Moses was born of a Hebrew slave. We know he was rescued by Pharaoh's daughter. We know he was brought up an Egyptian prince. We also know that he murdered an Egyptian for beating a Hebrew slave, and that he fled to the wilderness and married a priest's daughter and became a shepherd. So, the message title was Prince, Pauper, Pastor. We're at section 2, which is the pauper bit. So we've gone from being a prince, and he was... Is this too loud, by the way? Is it getting a bit shouty? No? It's not me getting shouty, hopefully. So, we have got to what is now been affectionately known by me as the middle age. And that's just not an excuse. That brought a few more laughs than I needed. But if you'd like to turn to your Bibles to Exodus 3 and 4, we're going to read some Bible today. So I'm going to just start with the very first few verses, should I say. Now Moses was keeping the flock in the father-in-law Jethro, the priest of Midian, and he led his flock to the west side of the wilderness and came to Horeb, the mountain of God. And an angel of the Lord appeared to him in a flame and a fire of the midst of bush. He looked, and behold, the bush was burning, and yet it was not consumed. And Moses said, I will turn aside to see this great sight, why the bush is not burned. Now this kind of got me stuck a little bit. Sorry, I'm going to interrupt myself here. Isn't that not just a bit odd? Just a bit odd of a way to start something in the Bible. Do you think, when you walk along the road and you see something a little bit normal, do you audibly turn around and go, I will turn aside to see the great sight? Why the bush is not burned? No, you kind of look strange. Anyway, so I just wanted to point that out. He's noticing something remarkable. Now, remarkable is something worthy of remark. Doesn't mean to say necessarily it's good or it's bad. But at this point, he's making a comment. He's taken back about something that he's seen that is just like, ooh, that's a bit weird. We'll talk about the burning bush in a bit. When the Lord saw, he turned aside to see. God called him out of the bush and said, Moses, Moses. And he said, here I am. Then he said, do not come near. Take off your sandals and your feet and go to the place on which you're standing, for it is holy ground. And he said, for I am God of your father, the God of Abraham, the God of Isaac, and the God of Jacob. And Moses hid his face, for he was afraid to look at God. Then the Lord said, I have surely seen an affliction of my people, who are in Egypt, and have heard the cry. And have heard the cry because of their taskmasters. I know their sufferings, and I have come down to deliver them out of the hand of the Egyptians, and to bring them up out of the land to a good and broad land, a land flowing with milk and honey, to the place of the Canaanites, the Hittites, the Amorites, the Perizzites, the Cellulites, and the Gigabites. I'm not sure they were in there in anybody's version, but they're in my version. But I get stuck on some of the names, and whenever I hear that, I just can't help it. I'm sorry. So, just going to read to that point of Exodus, and we shall be reading some more, and we shall be reading through into chapter 4. But I just really wanted to talk a moment about the middle age, as I said. So, Moses, as we said, we discussed, he was a mighty man. He was brought up by political leaders, by, I don't want to say warlords because that sounds a bit too gangster, by military leaders, that's what I was looking for. He was brought up a man of privilege. He had all everything in his grasp that he would ever want to, or we think we would ever want to wish for, financially, physically, emotionally. You think this man's got it sorted. So he was what many people might call a mighty man. But he fell to be a lowly shepherd, tending a stubborn flock in a lonely pasture. And I got to think, was this just not a training ground for his next assignment? So it made me think, this middle age, you think we go from where we think in God's, in our own eyes, where we think we're high and mighty and stuff, and we end up in a position where we think, actually, this doesn't really seem right. Don't want to be here. Not sure why. This is a bit difficult. Life isn't quite as easy as I thought it was going to be. But in the background, what's happening is we've just been prepared. Do you think this was just the type of preparation that he needed for leading a nation such as Israel? It's a nation of stubborn people, and Israel was God's special flock. I put special in bunny ears, as we used to say, in that. And what does special mean? I'll leave that up to yourselves to work that one out. And Moses was actually his chosen shepherd. So he took a flock, God took a flock of people and a shepherd, and he chose both of them. The point is in the chase, and the chase is the fact of how do we know what we're being chosen for and what that looks like, what we're being called out from and what we're being called into. But from being called out from and being called into is there's a gap. And quite often we don't really understand what's in the gap. Moses had 40 years. So as I said to you, Moses had 3 lots of 40 years. And 40 as a prince, 40 as a pauper, 40 as a pastor, leader. We'll stick with peas because I like lots of peas. I should have said lots of peace. So he had 40 years of kind of what could be deemed as waiting around, what could be deemed as working and waiting as a shepherd in something that was kind of menial to where he was, where he'd fallen from what we would see fallen from grace. But actually what was happening, he was being prepared for a lifelong faithful ministry, because he wasn't to know, but in kind of over the next plus 40 years, that he was going to lead that chosen flock. And I think what it worked me, I think at that moment I wouldn't like to compare myself anywhere to the mighty man of Moses, but if I draw any similarities in my own life, is that I thought I'd had it all sussed. I was doing, what I thought I was good at. I was, in business, I was doing this, and everything was okay, it was good, I was successful. And then I have that moment, and we talked about this before, that holy discontent. And Moses' holy discontent was when he saw the Hebrew slave being beaten. And it reared up in him inside something that said, actually, no, this is where my identity lies. And I felt the same when I went through my wilderness years, and I then saw I was a Christian from an early age, and I had a real genuine walk with God, but because of life's troubles and trials, I'd fallen away. But then I kind of felt God kind of pulling on my chain a little bit, kind of saying, this isn't right, and there was something welling up within me that was saying. So I'm kind of mirroring some of the behaviour of Moses in some respects, and I think we all can. I think we can all look at our lives and we can all go, this is where I was, and this is where I would like to be. But in this middle, it can be a bit, I don't know what the word, meh. It can be a bit, I don't know what's going on. Nothing seems to be potentially going right. I'm just going to go and do what I need to go and do. But I've got this holy discontent, which has driven me out of the place I was to the place I want to go. But I've not got there, and how do I get there? And I'm getting frustrated for not getting there. I'm looking at my life going, I just want to be. I know when I came out from the business world, all I wanted to be was an evangelist. All I wanted to be was in ministry. That was all I wanted to be. It took me 6 years to get to here. And that wasn't, I felt I was ready 6 years ago because I felt God had put that call on my life. Yes, God had put that call on his life, but thankfully for you lot, God knew better. I'm still a work in progress, but I'm sure you will help me. Dave's nodding frantically there. Yeah. So God doesn't suddenly send out his servants. He doesn't kind of like what? I'm putting you out there and I'm going to put you in there. When you are recruited into the army, you go through your basic training and then you become a specialist and you do various bits and pieces. You are trained, you are supported, you know what what you feel. There's some people are bombardiers, I don't know the right term. Some people are, some people have, in charge of people. Some people are supporting people. Some people are out there in the barracks or in the whatever, out getting dirty, all sorts of things. But there's people have various jobs and roles, and actually, Valerie, you're laughing at me now. You know all the things, probably all the titles better than me. But anyway, you are called to a specific role and a specific function. You can't have somebody who can cook with a rifle. Potentially. Well, you probably can, because probably a lot of them could do it. But my point is that if you're trained to be a chef, you want to be a chef. If you're trained to be a rifleman, you're a rifleman. If you're going to be a logistics engineer, then you're a logistics engineer. So he doesn't just take you out and just drop you right into that thing. There's a training process to go. So he takes some time, and for different people, that's a different amount of time. It seems to be an inordinate amount of time for me. I was getting so impatient about what I was doing. But he took time out to equip people for what they were called to do. God's delays aren't always evidence for unconcern, because we think, well, wait, I've had this call in my heart, I want to get started, I know what I'm going to do. People aren't hearing the gospel because I'm not out there. Trust me, there's few other people giving the gospel message out there than us. Yes, we are called to go and do this, but it's not all resting on my shoulders, or resting on your shoulders, or resting on your shoulders. It is something that we are called to action to do. So his delays aren't evidence of his going, it's not really that important yet. Because actually what he wants you to do is he wants you to be right. He hears all our groans and our cries and the suffering that's in the world. He hears that. But he also hears the fact that actually he takes time to equip you. I've seen it several times, and you probably all have it, is God equips the called. Not that, he doesn't send it, I've got this wrong now. God equips the called, doesn't call the equipped. That's the one. So if you see these great speakers and great, what you would think are evangelists, he doesn't necessarily send these people out to be evangelists. He might send them out to be something else. Because we're going to be leaning on God for what he wants us to do, not on what we think we can do and what we think we can offer for him. He will tell us what he wants us to do, and we're in that position of vulnerability and dependence on him. And ultimately then what we can get to is the point that what he has promised, he will perform. If you look at the Bible, it's a complete book of promises. There is so much that's in there that has promised. Now, some of them have not yet been realized in reality as we hear today. There are some prophecies which are still yet to happen. But if you look at, and particularly Joshua, as you know, one of my favourite characters, but in his book, it is a book of fulfilled promises. The inheritance has been given and has been taken by many of them, but yet the inheritance is being dished out for the advance, for the future, that it will be claimed. So what God has promised, he will perform. So if he says he's going to do something, he will do it. And we don't understand why he doesn't often do it at the timescales that we think he should do it. And we think sometimes we should be, it should be now, it needs to be now. When the time is right, God gets to work. Not when we think the time is right. So the kind of subtitle of the message was also Mind the Gap. So we've all been in that situation on a train, and you may have seen it, and it says, mind the gap. And there's this bit from between where we are and where we want to be, and there's a big cavernous hole between us. And if you're not careful, when we're in there, we can get into danger. So I started thinking about this gap and thinking, in Moses' life, what did his gap look like? And there was 4 or 5 points that I drew out of this. But what I just kind of have this picture in my mind is we're kind of over here on audio. This isn't going to work. But I'm right over one side. We're over here, and this is where I started. And as I walk over and I've got into the gap and I'm kind of here, but where I want to be is not quite as far as where I was. So I'm further to where I'm going than to where I used to be. You know, most of the battles that we encounter. So look at when Jesus was on the water and the storm came. You know, one, Jesus knew that was going to happen. That wasn't any accident there whatsoever. But the storm, the disciples are almost at that point, like, oh, let's turn back, it's too rough, let's go back. But they were more likely to be closer to the other side than they were when they set off, because this had been some time. So while facing trials and tribulations, we can quite often turn around and go, do you know what, I can't take this, I need to turn around, I need to go back. But we are quite often so close to the victory, we are so close to the destination, that sometimes we just have to keep on pushing through. And who do we rely on? We rely on Jesus. They went and got Jesus. And they relied on him and to get to the other side. So it's a slight little bit of an aside. But if we turn back to our Bibles, there was 4 points which I want to talk about, 5 I think actually. The discontent, the sign, the promise, the doubt, and the equipping. So the discontent we've already discussed was a Hebrew slave was beaten. And at this point, Moses rediscovered his identity. Something welled up inside him. He rediscovered who he was. He knew who he thought he was. And I don't know, at this point, did he know? How much did he know? In actuality, how much practically did he know what was going on? But when there was something that happened, his identity was reborn within him. So if we turn back now to Exodus 3, verses 3 and 4. And Moses said, I will turn aside to see this great sight, why the bush is not burned. When the Lord saw, he turned aside and said, God called him out of the bush, said, Moses, Moses. And he said, here I am. I will turn aside to see this great sight. I mentioned that before. I mean, it must be amazing. You go past something that is quite insignificant. It's a bush. He must see loads of bushes when he's out in the wilderness. 100 million bushes. And I actually, in my own head, kind of get one of those tumbleweeds going that in. When I ever hear this, I kind of see this tumbleweed going down, the kind of like moments going. And it's just like, it was a bit like one of those kind of cowboy westerns. So there's not a lot of structure. There's not a lot of body to those bushes, is there? They're kind of quite spindly and quite everything. But yet, you've got then this roaring fire that would normally consume that bush within seconds. And it's not. It's going. And it's going. And it's going some more. So I was kind of thinking there must be symbology in this somewhere. And I got to thinking, so perhaps the picture is that Moses is the bush, something that's quite weak and frail and naturally can be exhausted quite quickly. And God is the all-encompassing and all-consuming, empowering fire that never goes out. So we can't do things. I mean, the bush didn't burn up or burn out. But it does show that with God, that all things are possible, because the bush kept on burning. But was it the bush that was burning? Was it just the fire of God's fire that kept on burning? So he saw this sign. He got this sign. We've all had these burning bush moments, or I hope if you haven't, you will have one soon. But we all would have been called at some point in your life. You would have had something that would have got your, not got your back up, but you kind of like, oh, wow, that's something different. Maybe that's just the point in your journey that it's you coming to meet the Lord. And you're waiting for the next sign. But believe me, there will be a burning bush experience in your life. It will happen. The promise. If we go to the promise, which is actually, I just want to read through verses 5 and 10. 5 through 10, should I say. Then he said, do not come near. Take your sandals off on your feet, for the place on which you are standing is holy ground. And he said, I am the God of your father, the God of Abraham, the God of Isaac, and the God of Jacob. And Moses hid his face, for he was afraid to look at God. Then the Lord said, I have surely seen the affliction of my people, who are in Egypt, and have heard their cry because of their taskmasters. I know their sufferings, and I have come down to deliver them out of the hand of the Egyptians, and bring them up and out of the land to a good land, a broad land, a land flowing with milk and honey, to the place of the Canaanites, the Hittites, the Amorites, the Perizzites, the Hivites, and the Jebusites. And now, behold, the cry of the people of Israel has come to me, and I have also seen the oppression with the Egyptians that oppress them. Come, I will send you to Pharaoh, that you may bring my people, the children of Israel, out of Egypt. So the promise, when we're in situations, how do we know who's talking to us? How do we know what's talking to us? We need something tangible, something that we've seen something before. So God assured him that he was God of his fathers. When he spoke to him, he said, I am the God of basically Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. He told him who he was. And he assured him, he gave him that peace. So when we're having that sign, or when something's going on, we need to go back to the Lord and just say, look, just reveal to me, the true identity, because we are attacked. We get attacks and we get voices from left, right, and centre. So what thing that God will make sure is he will release his identity and make sure that he knows that you know what he is saying is from him. He also said in the promise that he had heard the cries and seen and felt their suffering. Now, C.S. Lewis talks about the megaphone of pain and the problem of pain. And it's that, some people, you've had the question, I've had the question, why does God allow suffering? And do you know what? To me, I can't answer that. I really can't answer that in its entirety. But what I do know is that, unfortunately, it's a byproduct of God giving us enough chance to find him and seek him. That the fact that if you... leprosy, leprosy is actually really, look at leprosy as being like with boils and things and people with limbs missing and stuff like that. Actually, leprosy is more about the absence of a pain system. So when you break your ankle, you don't walk on it because you're crippling, because you've got that pain. If you didn't have that pain, you would continue to walk on your ankle and mangle it up completely. If you were to see a fire and you go, I just put my hand in there, you had no pain, you'd keep on burning, your hand would burn off. Pain is a safety mechanism. So, whereas I don't understand why things happen sometimes and why God continues to let pain happen in that respect from what the world can see, I understand that there is a purpose behind that pain. And I understand that I am benefiting from that. It doesn't make sense to me in my logic thinking pain equals blessing. But that's not what I'm saying. What I'm saying is the fact that there's a reason behind it, and he's giving us plenty of time. We are people who are free will. We have got to make a decision. So because we are living in a decaying world, this pain and suffering is happening. Doesn't mean to say that God's not heard it. Doesn't mean to say that God doesn't know what's going on. Doesn't mean to say that it's not breaking his heart. But there is a process. There is a reason. For 430 years, the Egyptians, the Hebrews were in Egypt. So it wasn't like it was just something that, somebody's got a bad rap here. We need to do something about it. This was a long, long time. Generations and generations and generations. People had forgotten God. People had forgotten that they had just lived this wake up, slavery, go to bed. That's all they knew. Pain and suffering. But in the promise, God assures us, or it promised to Moses, he assures them that he has heard and he has felt. But now that it was time to deliver them out of Egypt into the promised land. There's a time for everything. We know that. There's a time to cry, a time to laugh, a time, there is a time for everything. And why God chose that time, why God chose 40 years to prepare Moses for that time, I don't know. But he did, and there was a reason behind that. And we will find that reason, I guess, when we get up and we can ask God about it. But I guess when we go and ask God about it, we probably won't care. We'll probably forget about all the pain and suffering when we're in heaven, and all those unanswered questions. I have a list as long as my arm of questions I would like to ask. Do Adam and Eve have belly buttons? I don't know. Anyway, the last part in that promise is something that really kind of struck me. It's, come, I'll send you. And it's like, really? Hang on, I've just spent so long getting out of Egypt because of what's going on, and fleeing because it was of what was going on. And I'm a bit of a failure, really, because I've kind of did the wrong thing in many people's respects, and I fled, and I've kind of fled in disgrace. You're really going to send me? I don't want to go back. Send someone else. But no, he was like, no, I really want to send you. Because actually, we've said it before, what is your mess becomes your biggest message. So he's taking somebody who's been in that situation, who's been in that environment, taking them back, and somebody who has no faith in themselves, in their own ability, but has a faith in the Lord, and the Lord can take them through that journey. The Lord can do that, and it's only with the Lord that that would happen. So I just see Moses going, really? Not me? If we turn now, this is going to be a slightly longer section, so I do apologise. There is a lot of Bible, but this is really important today for me and for you, I believe. But Moses said to God, who am I that I should go to Pharaoh and bring the children of Israel out of Egypt? He said, but I will be with you, and I shall be the sign for you, and I have sent you, and when you have brought out the people of Egypt, you shall serve God on this mountain. Then Moses said to God, if I come to the people of Israel and say to them, the God of your fathers has sent me to you, and they say, what is my name? And then what they say to them, and what shall I say to them? God says to Moses, I am who I am. That alone is a bit of a bizarre statement. I am who I am. And will feature in the next series I will do. So that will be after this. So, but it is really a case of saying, I am who I am. You cannot, they'll have no beginning, no end, no start, no finish. No, you cannot try and put me in a box. Because I was before there was anything. He goes on further, and I'm not going to read any more of this, but he goes on through, he's about the pain, the suffering, but it brings to a point at chapter 4, verses 1, that Moses answered, but behold, they will not believe me or listen to my voice. So we get to the doubt. I get to doubt. I didn't know. When I left work and I wanted to come into ministry, I was like, I don't know anything, but I know that's what I want to do. So I went through three kind of elements, which ironically then afterwards, when I write them down, spelt war, which was complete. It was only as I was typing my notes afterwards. So I am not worthy. I got to that point that I have been, and Moses, I'm guessing, going through this, that his self-esteem is really quite low because he kind of abandoned his people. He could have maybe done, if he'd stayed around, he maybe could have done something, been more useful to them. But he, made kind of a mistake, and he scarpered. And kind of, so he didn't feel worthy. He said, I'm not able. The bloke had a stutter, apparently. I apparently have one this morning. So, but we have frailties, we have conditions that you think, I'm not able to do this. I don't have the guts to take what it takes to stand up the front and speak to these people or lead these people. And finally said, I'm not ready. He said, I'm not ready. I haven't got the ability. I'm not worthy of doing this. By far and away, I'm not ready to do this. Quite often, do you know what? God will stick you in right at the point when you're not ready. You heard the expression, jumping at the deep end, diving at the deep end. It is pretty much like that. God will put you in a position where it's him that you're relying on to get through that situation, not yourself. And he's done that with me a million times. So, worthy, able, and ready. Spelt to me war, and it was completely accidental afterwards, but we are in a war. And it was just a kind of a reminder of that actually if we want to see God from where we're going to where we're going, we will actually go through a war. We will go through difficulties, we go through challenges, but with God we can get through all of that. And actually, there was a point that I wanted to say, that he is, we're saying, I'm not worthy, I'm not able, I'm not ready. But in both chapters 3 and 4, verse 12 basically says, I will be with you. When I was doing my notes, I was like quick, I know it said it, one of them, it was either 3 or 4, but I'm sure it's verse 12. It either says, I will be with you. And I look, lo and behold, it says it in both verses. So what does that say? At both times it keeps telling us, I will be with you. We're not alone. he is with us. He's going to be by our side. He is walking the journey. And then just a few things on the equipping. We get to that point that we've realised we're not ready. We're not worthy. We're not anything but by the blood of Jesus we are. And we go, okay, Lord, we've heard various people, use me, take me. So we go through the equipping phase. And I say, Lord, be through that. So Moses said, and then we go through, I will read this portion here. Moses, but behold, they will not believe or listen to my voice, for they will say, the Lord did not appear to you. And the Lord said to him, what is in your hand? He said, it's a staff. And he said, throw it on the ground. So he threw it on the ground, it became a serpent. And Moses ran from it. I think I would. But the Lord said to Moses, put out your hand and catch it by the tail. Now, does anybody notice anything stupid about that? What was that, David? Grab it by its tail? Yeah. How many of the people we've seen snake wranglers grab a snake by its tail? They don't, do they? Not at all. Because it's the stupidest thing you can do. Because it'll turn around and it'll bite you. They grab it by the neck of the head. And they hold on to it, don't they? If the rest of it's flipping around, that's fine. And when I'm reading that, I'm going like, really? I'm not sure I would. So even when God's telling us what to do, he's actually telling us things to do that we're going, are you sure? And actually, it takes me back to Joshua and going round the walls of Jericho. As you're going, do you know what? And there's like hundreds of millions of warriors, these going around. And they go back to their wives and they said they've been told by Joshua, we're going to go out and we're going to take the walls. And they come back that first day and they go, so love, what did you do? I said, we walked round. What? Did you not get your sword out? No. We just walked. Okay. Next day, I said, so what did you do then, love? Did you get your sword out? Just like, no. What did you do? We walked. 7 days. And they did this and they continued to walk and blow a few trumpets. And the walls came tumbling down. So we have to rely on divine wisdom, not human logic. So there's those times that we actually go, do you know what, Lord, what you're asking me is completely ridiculous. But because that's what I think it is, not because what he thinks it is. We look at how many times in the Bible do we have those stories and going, God's telling people to do things, and it's like, oh, okay. That doesn't seem right. Anyway, so he took the snake by the tail, but literally as he took it, it turned back into his staff. And actually the message I got from this also was not about trusting God, was use what you've got in your hand. Because he had a staff, that's all he had. But it was something that God could use, whatever you've got in your hand, for your calling, for your mission. So for a sign. That they may believe the Lord God and their fathers, and the God of Abraham, the God of Isaac, and the God of Jacob has appeared to you. Again the Lord said to him, put your hand inside your cloak. And he put inside his cloak, and when it took it out, behold, the hand was leprous like snow. Then God said, put your hand back inside your cloak. So he put back his hand back inside his cloak, and when he took it out, behold, it was restored like the rest of his flesh. If they do not believe you, God said, or listen to the first sign, that they may believe the latter sign. And if they do not believe, so he changed his staff into a snake and his snake back into a staff. He's put his hand in, it's come out a bit iffy, and he's put it back in, it's come back in. To me, I would have to say, I would start believing there's something a bit special about this person, or something about the person who's being sent. There's something a bit special about. But no, just in case. If they do not believe, even these two signs will listen to your voice, take some water out from the Nile and pour it on the dry ground, and the water that you shall take from the Nile will become the blood on dry ground. So a third one. So we're turning water into blood. We're not. He is. So, I couldn't resist. Don't underestimate God. Don't be in denial. Sorry, it was a bad joke. I was waiting for the pennies to drop. Water from the Nile. There we go. It wasn't that funny because I had to tell you it. But anyway, so don't be in denial about God's abilities. And in verse 10, the final thing I want to mention on in here is that Moses said to the Lord, oh my Lord, I am not eloquent, either in the past or since I've spoken with your servant, but I am slow of speech and tongue. The Lord said to him, who has made this man's mouth? Who makes him mute or deaf or seeing or blind? It is not I, the Lord. Now therefore go, and I will be your mouth and teach you what you shall speak. Despite our disabilities, he's going to use us. At the end of the day, he made us. He knows. our inners, our outers. He knows that everything. Doesn't matter what we think we are. It matters what he thinks we are. And we are holy. We are set apart. We are restored and redeemed. He's going to teach you. He's going to take you on that journey. He's going to guide you. There's times when you go in thinking, I really have no idea. But he's going to be with you every step of the way. My final thought is the fact that he then says later, he said, like, send someone else. Accept your role. He actually then ended up getting Aaron to come along with them, and Aaron be his bit of a spokesman, which is a little bit of a mistake because you're combining kind of prophet and priest roles here. So Moses being the prophet, Aaron being the priest. And it was like kind of accept your role. If God gives you a role, accept your role. Because actually sometimes there's some confusion there, and we all know that Aaron ended up, supporting the Israelites to make a golden calf at the bottom of the hill. So it's like, just take on what God asks you to take on to make sure that we're doing what God's asking you to do. Stand up, take on board, because, you don't want to miss the blessing he's going to use you for. And you want to be, you want to walk in strength in what he's doing. We've seen Moses go through this journey from a prince to a pauper, to being equipped to a man, and yet he's still someone who's doubting himself. But you know what we see later on, and if you look at the great speeches Moses gave through the rest of the book, he didn't need anybody's help but God's help. He didn't need Aaron's help in the end. He actually gave some of these amazing speeches. In particular, his final speech in Deuteronomy is particularly magnificent. He went out on a bang. The will of God will never lead you where the power of God cannot enable you. The will of God will never lead you to where the power of God can't enable you. So walk by faith. Walk by faith in Jesus. Walk by faith in his promises. Moses never dreamt that he would be used in the way that he was being used. He's gone through this journey. We will see in the final part of this of where he goes and where he's going to be called to and what he's going to do. But it's been a bit of a roller coaster ride up until this point, I'd say. So we've seen the first 2/3 of his life. Come back next week for the final third. Thank you, everybody, for listening. Thank you for your time. Let me just pray for you all. Heavenly Father, I just thank you for the opportunity to talk about your word and to encourage my friends here, Lord Jesus. Just as they go on their way, let them be blessed and